revealed. 12 spine-chilling midnight shift stories that will haunt your sleep forever. Claire's heart raced as she made her rounds in the hospital, the monotonous beeping of machines now clanging in her ears, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead like ominous warning signs. Night after night, she dealt with unsettled patients, their fears echoing against sterile walls. Tonight, though, felt different. The air thickened with a strange tension. A shadow loomed over her, a whisper creeping through the halls, warning of something sinister lurking just outside the hospital door. Suddenly, chaos ripped through the calm. A flood of patients stormed in, limbs mangled, clothes torn, eyes wide with terror. They stumbled in, pale as death, their stories colliding in a frenzied chorus. Claire leaned over a young man who clutched his side, blood seeping through his fingers as his voice trembled. I thought it was just a shadow at first, then it lunged. It had eyes like burning coal and it whispered my name. Panic twisted her gut as she felt the weight of his words. The Midnight Shrouder comes for those who linger in the shadows. Those words hung in the air, heavy and grotesque. The frantic murmurs of the hospital grew louder, spreading this new fear like wildfire. What kind of monster stalked the night? Claire shook off the chill creeping up her spine. She had a family to take care of, a fragile stability to maintain. Yet, the heaviness of dread settled in her chest, reminding her that the bills couldn't wait, nor could her husband, unemployed and desperate, nor her young children, waiting at home for bedtime stories instead of specters. Weeks crawled by in a suffocating rhythm of fear and fatigue. The midnight shifts turned into an endless loop of whispered warnings. Anonymous texts began appearing on her phone, chilling her to the bone. Leave the hospital before it's too late. At first, she laughed it off as exhaustion. But that laugh turned to ice when she came across a photograph hidden behind a row of sterile gloves, fellow nurses, faces contorted in horror, standing outside the very park the patients spoke of. The tension tightened around Claire. The shadows seemed to stretch towards her, seeping into her bones. Each disappearance mirrored a rise in injuries. Families haunted by bills vanished, swallowed by the very shadows she was warned about. Desperation to uncover the truth consumed her. Slipping out during breaks, she prowled her quiet suburban streets, where silence was now a predator. She spotted Julia, her trusted colleague, whispering frantically with worried families after her shifts. Trust was slipping through her fingers like sand. When confronted, Julia dismissed her fears, but her words felt like a trap. Claire's anxiety grew, twisting like a noose around her heart. One eerie evening, while parking her car, Claire noticed a child wandering alone. "Mommy!" they cried, their small voice echoing sweetly against the cold darkness. Unease prickled her skin as Claire approached, the child's gaze locked somewhere beyond her. Did something follow them? With her fellow nurses gathered, she felt it a palpable fear, a weight pressing on their chests. What was watching from beyond? The air thickened with forgotten horrors, leaving their breaths shallow. Heart racing, she ventured down the dark corridors of the abandoned wing of the hospital, her senses screaming. Just as she turned a corner, a cold breath swept through her, chilling her to the bone. She spun, eyes widening as she saw the figure from her nightmares, his features familiar, yet twisted by darkness, a colleague now wearing the mask of terror. Claire's fight for survival had begun, entangling her in the web of their community's hidden darkness. As she stared into the abyss, one question echoed: who or what had become of her neighbors? The Midnight Shrouder had become more than a tale, it was a looming, monstrous reality. The room pulsed with an eerie stillness, the shadows stretching further and deeper. Claire could feel a sinister chill wrap itself around her like a shroud. Her haunted colleague was no longer just a face in the crowd, he was now a living nightmare. She stumbled backward, heart pounding in her chest. The lights flickered, casting sharp silhouettes of eerie faces that danced on the wall. "Claire," the figure rasped, his voice distorted, almost unrecognizable. "You shouldn't have come here." She blinked, trying to gather herself, to shake off the surreal feeling weaving around her mind. But he stepped closer, eyes glistening like dark marbles. Whispers grew louder, echoing through the empty hallways. The Midnight Shrouder had clearly found a way to reach inside the hospital, whispering dread into the hearts of those trapped in its grasp. "Listen to them," he hissed, his breath cold against her face. "The shadows are hungry." Claire felt the weight of his words crush her. She knew she had to escape, but where could she possibly go? She turned back, running down the corridor, the sound of her shoes echoing against the concrete underfoot. The flickering lights danced maniacally, creating ghosts that seemed to reach out to her, willing to pull her into their dark embrace. Each frantic step felt heavier, as if invisible hands tugged at her limbs, trying to drag her backward into the depths of the shadows. The air smelled of stale dread, and every corner felt like a trap. She raced toward the exit, but the hallway seemed to stretch infinitely, mocking her escape. Just as she reached for the door, it burst open. A group of nurses poured in, their faces ghostly pale, eyes wide with terror. "Claire! You have to warn them!" one shouted, panic dripping from her words. It's taken." Before she could grasp what they meant, the lights extinguished entirely. Darkness pressed against her, thick as tar, drowning out the faint flickers of hope. The whispers returned, louder and sharper, clawing at her sanity. "There's nowhere to hide," they taunted, nowhere to hide. Adrenaline surged through Claire as she fought against the shadows. The whispers twisted around her, forming words that pierced her heart. Families lost, children haunted, her world reduced to screams and shadows. Time held no meaning. It was just her, the darkness, and the shadows that cornered her feeble light. With newfound determination she swiveled, ripping her way through the thick blackness. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears as she barreled forward, desperate to find the source of the dim light seeping through the cracks of a door just ahead. But as Claire pushed it open, her entire body froze. The horrified faces of her fellow nurses turned toward her, not in fright, but in pure terror, their eyes wide and glazed. A single figure stood before them, plucking at their sanity like strings on a violin, a tall, shadowy apparition draped in a cloak of nightmares. "Join us," it beckoned, and with a wave of its hand, the room shuddered. The whispers now rose into a terrifying harmony of despair that clawed at the very fabric of her mind. Suddenly, one nurse screamed, "Get out! It wants you next!" In that moment, the world erupted in chaos. The Midnight Shrouder's grip tightened, stretching forward towards Claire. Just as everything began to swirl in darkness, Claire's voice broke through the cacophony. "I want to let it take me." But as the shadows surged around her, a chilling question pierced through the fear: could she truly escape this monster that was feeding not just on fear, but on the very essence of all she held dear? The haunting silhouette loomed nearer, suffocating the last remnants of hope. The time for decision had come. Would she confront the Midnight Shrouder or succumb to the darkness? It was the crossroads of horror, and one way led into the abyss. The darkness suffocated Claire, clinging to her like a second skin. She could feel the whispers wrapping around her thoughts, tightening their grip. "Join us," they breathed, a chorus of despair that chilled her to the bone. She stepped back, ready to bolt, but the room began to close in, walls bending, pressing her closer to the Midnight Shrouder. "Stop!" she cried, her voice shaky but defiant. "You can't have me!" The being paused, its shadowy cloak billowing as if stirred by an unseen wind. The nurses around her stood frozen, entranced, eyes glossed over, trapped in a web of fear that only grew thicker. The Midnight Shrouder's grin grew wider, revealing emptiness where a mouth should be. "Do you not see?" it taunted. "They are merely waiting." "Waiting for what?" The walls pulsated with dark energy, the air thickening. Claire's heart thundered in her chest as she forced herself to consider her options, flee or fight. But an unseen force seemed to bind her in place, roots digging deep into the linoleum floor. She fought against it, desperately straining against the invisible chains. Suddenly, a scream shattered the air. It came from one of the nurses, a piercing wail that echoed through the darkness. "No! Don't look at it!" She clawed at her own eyes, as if trying to rip away the sight that had paralyzed her. The Midnight Shrouder reached out, fingers elongating like twisted branches, curling around the nurse's throat. "Join us," it whispered again, its voice insinuating, seductive. Claire's body ignited with panic. She needed to do something, anything to save her colleagues and escape this twisted nightmare. A plan began to forge in her mind. Look at me. She turned to the other nurses, forcing herself to sound stronger than she felt. You can fight it. Focus on me. Focus on. The shadows whispered louder, their voices a chaotic symphony urging the nurses to succumb. You can't resist, join us. Claire's heart raced. They were losing themselves, fading away one by one into the creature's grasp. She couldn't let that happen. She thought back to the stories she heard about the Midnight Shrouder. Legends said it feasted on fear, that it thrived on despair. Fear was its language. Remember who you are, she shouted, reaching for the nearest nurse. You have to fight it. Remember your families. Remember the reason you became a nurse. She saw the flicker of recognition in the nurse's eyes, a brief spark of rebellion. Claire pressed on, channeling all her memories of hope, all the reasons she had to fight against the darkness. We can't let it take us. We need each other. The creature hissed, disgust curling around its voice as it tightened its grip. Foolish girl. You think solidarity can save you? But then, like a ripple in water, the nurses' faces shifted. A collective awakening washed over them. Eyes sharpened, fear replaced with determination, they began to chant, their voices intertwining with Claire's. We want to join you, Midnight Shrouder. Infuriated, the dark figure recoiled, shadows swarming as if trying to extinguish the light of their resolve. Yet Claire could feel the power surge around her, an electrifying force born from unity. But just as Claire felt hope surging through her veins, the room began to tremble violently as if an earthquake had unleashed itself. The whispers morphed into furious howls that resonated so deeply, she feared her eardrums would shatter. Your resolve will be your downfall. The Midnight Shrouder roared, its true voice rumbling from deep within the abyss. The floor quaked beneath her feet, and Claire knew they were running out of time. Hold on! She screamed, adrenaline pumping through her. We're stronger together. But as the shadows threatened to pull them all under, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if this was a test, a game, and they had already lost? The ground split, revealing endless dark chasms below. Could she be strong enough? Would they be able to resist the Midnight Shrouder's call, or would fear finally claim its prize? As the very foundation of reality cracked open around them, Claire took a deep breath, staring into the shadow's hungry gaze, ready to confront her deepest terror. Would she plunge into the void, or could she turn the darkness itself into light? The answers lay just beyond reach. The floor continued to tremble, the chasm yawning wider, dark tendrils of despair reaching up like the skeletal hands of the forgotten. Claire felt her stomach twist. It was as if the horror was making room for worse things that lurked below. Shadows writhed around her, crawling up her legs, aching to pull her down into the depths of the unknown. Stay together, Claire shouted, struggling to keep the nurses focused. They were sweating, panic painted across their faces. Remember who you are. You're more than this fear. And as if their shouts fed off her courage, the nurses rallied, turning their terror into a mantra. We want to join you. Their voices echoed defiant, rising above the chaos. The Midnight Shrouder's expression shifted from smug amusement to unmasked rage. Foolish mortals! It screeched, its fingers tightening around the nurse's throat, squeezing the spirit from her. The nurse gasped, desperation flickering across her face. Claire! Help! A desperate plea that cut through the din. Claire lunged forward, arms outstretched, willing to embrace whatever deity met her gaze. She reached for the nurse, for all of them, as if they could form a protective barrier together. The moment their hands connected, a bright light ignited unexpectedly fierce, illuminating the dreary shadows around them. Look at the light! Claire yelled, feeling the power swell. It can save us! The light grew, pushing the choking darkness back in violent waves until the Midnight Shrouder howled in fury, its form flickering like a faulty light bulb. But it didn't retreat. It fought back fiercely, drawing the darkness tighter around its heart, waging a war of despair against their hope. No! It screamed, its voice echoing and distorting like warped glass. You belong to me. You are nothing without your fears. The air buzzed with energy, a tangible crackle as the flickering light clashed against the creature's darkness. Claire felt herself straining, the effort like swimming against a riptide. But behind her, the chance didn't falter. The nurses were an unstoppable force more than mere survival, they shouted for each other. Raising her chin, Claire felt her pulse steady, the fear transforming into raw determination. Fight. Fight for each other. Fight for the lives you save every day. In response, the light surged forward, a golden pulse blasting against the Midnight Shrouder. Its shadowy form contorted, wailing in terror and rage, clawed fingers unraveling one by one as the light surrounded them. But as the creature screeched its final elegy, the ground shook more violently. The cracks widened further, a roar escaping from within the void, hungry and grasping for the momentum Claire stored. In that chaotic moment, she felt a massive tug, an invisible force trying to pull her in. Don't let go, she urged the nurses, staring into their stricken faces. Their determination flickered uncertainly, and for a heartbeat, she feared they might succumb to despair. And just like that, she realized she was their beacon, but even beacons can dim. Would her light hold against the swallowing shadows? As the cries echoed in her ears, she rushed forward, lunging toward the Midnight Shrouder, aiming to cage its wrath. She needed to quell the storm inside herself before it overran them all. Together, Claire called again. It's now or never. Break free. The moment they pushed together, hands clasped tight with sheer will, the room erupted. The shadows clashed ferociously against their united front. But soon, Claire felt that her grasp weakened, energy fleeting. The light flickered as something stirred violently beneath the chasm. What lurked below? Would she be able to overcome the monumental challenge before her, or would they become just another sacrifice to the darkness? As the final crack split the ground wide open, Claire fought to keep her hold, desperately leaning into sheer will. Then, a whisper echoed from the depths below, seeping into her mind with chill. Join us, would they fall victim to that haunting call, or rise against the chilling tide of despair? The answer loomed like shadow over their fate. The air thickened, heavy with a suffocating dread as the whisper wove through Claire's mind. Each syllable dripped like poison, seeping deeper into her thoughts, tugging at the edges of her resolve. She felt the creeping chill of fear snaking up her spine, tight and constricting, while the darkness below churned and roiled, a living thing desperate to reclaim its prey. Close your eyes, Claire shouted, her voice cracking against the weight of despair. Focus on the light. Focus on each other. The nurses around her shivered, vulnerability creeping into their frantic cries. They were human, real, and in that moment, they felt the fraying tendrils of terror grip at their hearts. And then, the air shifted, almost like a silenced gasp, the chasm demanding attention. With a sudden ferocity, the ground moaned, splintering underfoot. Dark limbs reached and writhed with greedy urgency, snatching at their ankles, trying to drag them into the abyss. Claire looked down, panic surging through her veins as she saw the shadows intertwining around their feet. Don't move, she cried. Hold on to each other. Hold on to the light. But the grip of darkness tightened, pulling harder, an overpowering force that hissed promises of peace and surrender. Claire could see the fear in her colleague's eyes turning into something darker. Was the light enough? Did it shine so fiercely that they wouldn't fall victim to the despair that threatened to envelop them? A soft whimper broke through the cacophony. It came from the nurse Claire had tried to save. The creature had released her for now, but the result was suffocating. She gazed into Claire's eyes, and in that moment, Claire could see the flicker of hope dwindling, waning like a candle under a crushing weight. I can't hold on much longer, she gasped, voice shaky. No, Claire replied vehemently, pulling the nurse closer. You have to. We all have to. Together. The Midnight Shrouder loomed behind them, shadows shifting and dancing, drawing power from their despair. Its piercing gaze shifted back and forth, searching for weakness among the group, searching for any sign of surrender. Look closely, it taunted, its voice like broken glass. You think you're united? But wait, what do you see in one another's eyes? Doubt? Fear? Betrayal? With those words, the creature struck. It forged illusions from their darkest insecurities, fabricating twisted images of family, loved ones, and lives left behind, all abandoned in the shuffle of survival. Each image struck differently, cold blades of heartbreak slicing through the tenuous tether they built. No! Claire screamed, clenching her fists in determination. That's not who we are. We fight for one another. Suddenly, the light surged, nearly blinding in its brilliance, pushing against the overlapping shadows momentarily. For a breath, hope ignited. They saw each other clearly, the resolve strengthening once again as they grasped each other's hands tighter still. But just as quickly, the shadows countered, twisting back with furious intensity. The ground quaked even more, and Claire felt herself teetering. She glanced back into the abyss, feeling a profound musty breath creep at the nape of her neck, whispering chilling promises of relief, of peace. Claire, please, a voice broke the silence. It was another nurse, her face lost in panic. I just want to go home. The endless pull of despair fought to sweep them away. Were they strong enough to resist? Would the bonds they forged hold against the Midnight Shrouder's manipulation, or would their darkest fears consume them whole? With one final cry, Claire thrust her arm out towards the flickering light, heart racing, knowing she had to fight against more than just the darkness. She had to keep them together. Fight it! She roared, desperately rallying them. For every life you've saved, every soul you've touched, we will not become shadows! But as the light surged once more, Claire felt something shift deep within the chasm. The whispering stopped, replaced by a deep, resonant growl that emanated from below. And then it all went dark. What lay beneath the surface, waiting to emerge? Would they face the darkness together, or would they unravel, caught in the tendrils of despair? The answers beckoned, shrouded in mystery, as they clung to the last flicker of hope. The darkness engulfed them, thick and suffocating, as Claire's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing like a drum signaling their doom. The flicker of hope they had fought for flickered out, leaving only shadows and echoes. Where are you? She whispered, frantically scanning the black void that surrounded them. It was a horrifying, oppressive silence and absence of sound that made her stomach churn. The others were still there, she could feel them, their desperation vibrating through the tautness of the air, but the shadows seemed to weave between them, separating their hopes into thin, frayed threads. Suddenly, a chilling laugh sliced through the silence, crawling along her skin like icy fingers. The Midnight Shrouder, hiding in the dark, was still watching, feeding off their fear. Claire felt the prickle of sweat on her brow as she strained to see through the murk. Look at you, it hissed, its voice echoing like chains rattling against stone. You thought you could defy what awaits you. But tell me, where is the strength you spoke of? Where is your unity? Shut up! Claire shouted. We want to listen to you. But her voice wavered, doubt creeping in. The fear skittered low in her belly, and she knew she had to rally them before it suffocated her. She turned back to her colleagues, each of their faces now just faint outlines against the backdrop of terror. Everyone! Focus on the light. Remember why we fight. With that, they instinctively reached for each other's hands, fingers slipping through the dampened air, desperate to connect. But they were losing ground, the darkness swirling around their ankles, dragging them closer to the abyss. I can't hold on! A voice cried out, desperation spilling like a fresh wound. Claire watched in horror as one nurse stumbled, the shadows snatching at her form. No! Claire lunged forward, but it was like pushing against a tidal wave. The inky tendrils coiled around the nurse's legs, pulling her down. Help! She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness, her figure swallowed whole. Panic raced through Claire. We have to help her! But another nurse trembled beside her, eyes wide and unseeing. What if we can't win this? What if we're meant to fail? No! Claire's voice burst with determination, but the weight of those words hung heavy in the air, pregnant with doubt. The Midnight Shrouder pressed its advantage. You see? This is what you are, weak, divided, it taunted. Your hope is nothing but a flickering candle, waiting for the storm. With that, a gust of frigid wind rushed through the void, nearly knocking her off her feet. Claire stumbled as she fought to regain her balance, her grip on the others slipping. The shadows whispered louder, raking claws against her psyche, haunting memories and fears flooding her mind. Ultimately, it was a fear she dreaded most: failure. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting a wave of nausea. Stop. You can't win. I want to let you. She took a shaky breath, forcing herself to focus on the bright memories that brought her here, the patients they saved, the laughter shared, the camaraderie formed in the heat of battle. The light flickered weakly in her mind, but something in her stirred, igniting a spark. Guys! The light is in us. We are the light. Together. Suddenly, a surge of warmth ignited within her. It spread like fire through the others, gripping her hands. The candles sparked back to life, the light pushing against the shadows that gnawed at them. Claire's eyes flicked open, a fierce determination blazing within. But the Midnight Shrouder let out a shrill scream, its mask of confidence cracking for the first time. No! You will not escape. I will feast on your despair. Then, the ground shook violently beneath them, and the brightness began to fade. The flickering light flickered, and the shadows clawed their way back, stronger. Claire's heart sunk as she felt the connection weakening, the dark tendrils creeping back. Somewhere in the swirling madness, she could still hear that faint whisper, a promise, a warning. When she looked up, eyes wide with disbelief, she saw something shifting in the dark below. The ground split, revealing a churning void, and Claire felt panic seize her throat. This wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. Beneath them lurked a darker truth waiting to be revealed. Get ready! She shouted, fueled by raw adrenaline. Fight for each other, no matter what it takes. But as the shadows surged, Claire had to wonder, could they withstand what was waiting beneath? Or had they already entered a nightmare from which there was no escape? The ground trembled beneath Claire's feet, sending a reverberation of dread through her body. She could feel the others teetering on the edge of panic, their breaths coming in short gasps as they struggled to maintain their hold on one another. The shadows pressed in closer, tendrils of darkness entwining like serpents around their legs, pulling fiercely as if trying to drag them into the abyss below. Don't let go. We're stronger together, Claire urged, her voice rising above the chaos that enveloped them. It was a desperate attempt to mask the growing doubt that clawed at her insides. But it was too little, too late. She could see fear etched on their faces, canyons of despair that threatened to consume them whole. One by one, as their eyes widened in terror, Claire sensed the bonds straining, some starting to release their grip altogether. With one last surge of will, she squeezed her eyes shut and envisioned that light. They had to fight it. It was in them, it had to be. The warmth grew colder though, chilling Claire from the inside. Come on! She yelled, though the cry felt weak and thin. We can't give up! Then, from the depths of the void, a new sound emerged, a guttural rumble, low and menacing. The Midnight Shrouder's laughter echoed, curling around them. Each malicious note sank into them like ice. Foolish mortals, it taunted, your unity is nothing without true strength. What will you do when the light fades? What will happen when you stand alone? Around them, whispers rose and fell, cruel echoes of failures and past regrets. The tendrils of darkness began wrapping tighter, squeezing the air from Claire's lungs. Each breath turned shallow as despair seeped into her veins. They were losing their grip, both physically and mentally. Suddenly she felt a jolt of energy surge from someone close, a flicker of resolve. The nurse beside her, Ella, clutched Claire's hand in a vice-like grip. We have to fight. Together. Ella's voice carried a fire that ignited the fading light within Claire. Right. Claire shouted, feeling the first true glimmer of hope. We push. We hold on. We are not alone. The words felt right, a commitment to one another. As if responding to their collective will, the shadows hesitated, twisting uncertainly. Claire could feel the other nurses rallying behind her, drawing strength from their shared purpose. What is happening? Someone shouted. Keep the connection. Light on. Claire commanded, her heart racing. She felt the warmth expand within their circle, brightening in defiance of the darkness. But the shadows, sensing their resurgence, lashed out more violently. A cry pierced the air as another nurse stumbled back. Her fear had overwhelmed her. Claire watched, horror-struck, as the tendrils snaked down and enveloped her completely. "No!" Claire screamed, her voice splintering. The darkness tightened its grip, suffocating shouts blending into an orchestra of despair. "Forget about her," the Midnight Shrouder hissed. "You can't save anyone now. You don't even know what lurks in the depths, do you?" Claire felt her heart seize. "What do you mean?" she called, keeping her voice steady as another tremor shook the ground. "Awaken the truth," it taunted, its voice now layered with a mocking glee. The earth beneath them quaked violently, and a fissure grew wider, revealing darkness that seemed alive, pulsating with malevolence. As if in response to the Shrouder's command, shadowed figures began to emerge from the blackness, flickering shapes of agony that twisted and writhed, rising like nightmares from their darkest corners. "Hold on!" Ella yelled, but the terror was palpable. Panic surged anew as they all gripped tighter. Would the bond they built be enough? The shadows weren't just after them, they encircled hope itself, crumbling everything in their path. But as Claire met Ella's eyes, she saw something of clarity. Perhaps the truth lurked beneath their fears, an undeniable strength waiting to be summoned. But what other terrors awaited them if they ventured further? Could they face the nightmare that lay hidden in the churning depths? Claire realized, with dawning dread, that confronting the Midnight Shrouder might just uncover more than they had bargained for. The shadows twisted, each flickering form a sigil of despair that threatened to unravel everything. Claire's pulse quickened as panic swelled like a rising tide. Ella's grip was firm, but the darkness clawed at their ankles, whispering vile promises in a dozen voices. "Stay focused," Claire shouted, her breath coming out in ragged gasps. "We're not finished yet." The words felt hollow against the palpable dread settling in the air. From the depths, the Midnight Shrouder's laughter made the hairs on her arms stand on end. "Isn't it wonderful to feel the weight of your decision? A choice binds you, doesn't it? Choose wisely, or you'll be lost forever." Suddenly, the shadows surged, a mass of tendrils, wet and slithering, reaching greedily for anything they could touch. Claire felt a flick of panic wrap around her heart. She was losing them. Losing everyone. "Push back! We're stronger!" Claire yelled, her voice trembling but earnest. She felt their connection fragile, but there. As if answering her call, a bright flash ignited deep within the circle of nurses. It lit their faces, not with glory, but with stark terror. It was not the light to fend off darkness, but the light revealing the truth, reflections of themselves, warped and distorted within the shadows. Each figure shifted in agony, revealing past regrets and unconfessed sins, whispers of guilt that clawed at their hearts. Claire staggered backward, horrified that each image mirrored a fear she thought buried. Faces of loved ones twisted in pain, an echo of what could happen if they failed. "Stop it! This is not us!" Ella cried out, her voice raw. "It's a lie!" Claire shouted, trembling. "We faced this together. All our past." She hesitated, her heart clenching. "They brought us here now." In that cascading moment, she understood every ounce of pain was a thread, weaving them together. Clinging to each other was not just survival. It was the essence of their fight against the shrouded nightmares. The shadows hesitated, as if caught in a powerful storm. With clenched fists and gritted teeth, Claire pressed on. "Remember your bond. Remember love. Our light doesn't just shine, it burns." Ella's voice joined Claire's, rising above the cacophony. "Together, we break free." Across the circle, the nurses followed their lead. One by one, their hands tightened around each other. The warmth emanated, fighting against the icy suffocation, pushing against the shadows. But the Midnight Shrouder was relentless. Darkness coiled around them, thickening like a blanket. It screeched in fury, vibrating through the fissures in the earth, unearthing voices from the depths that clawed at the edges of sanity. "Embrace your reality. You are nothing without your fear." Their voices, once fervent, began to falter beneath the tide of despair. Sweat beaded on Claire's forehead, and she felt the bitter chill of hopelessness permeate her bones. Her heart raced as they fought, but the shadows were smarter than they appeared. They remembered their pain, craved it. "Don't let the doubt in," Claire cried again. "What we have, it's worth fighting." Yet, as they gripped tighter, the voices emerged thicker, sifting through their minds like thorns. Darker truths, hidden fears, malevolent memories that resurfaced to steal their courage. One nurse let out a strangled scream, pulling away as the shadows jabbed at her weaknesses. "No!" Claire shouted, terror rippling through her. The nurse began to sink, swallowed as tendrils tightened, feeding on fear. With desperation mixing with resolve, Claire grasped Ella's arm, determination flooding her spirit. "We've got to face it together. What lies beneath, we can conquer it." Their hearts raced in tandem, sinking in electric rhythm as they leaned into the darkness. Each confession, each shared pain, became a bulwark against despair. The shadows writhed, but a flicker of light fought back within the recesses of Claire's heart. The loss, the fear, they galvanized their resolve, merging as one collective heartbeat. Would this strength hold against the Midnight Shrouder's final assault? Would their truth be enough to banish the darkness, or would they unravel before the cruel honesty of what lay in those depths? As Claire pressed forward, she caught a glimpse of what lurked beyond the threshold of their fears, a monstrous, grotesque silhouette that promised more than met the eye. Would they have the strength to confront it? The weight of the monstrous figure pressed down on Claire, making it hard to breathe. She squinted past the swirling mass of shadows, searching for clarity, dread pooling in her stomach. The silhouette morphed, twisting into something indistinct yet overwhelmingly sinister. The air thickened around her, as if the darkness bore a physical weight, squeezing the life from their tenuous bond. "Claire," Ella whispered, panic lacing her voice. They stepped back, but the shadows closed in, relentless and hungry. "No," Claire ground out, forcing herself to remain steady. "We can't back down now. We've come too far." She could feel Ella's heart racing against her arm. The figure shifted again, elongating, its features sharpening like blades in the night. An eye unblinking, black as the void, stared directly into Claire's soul, revealing her deepest fears. It pulsed with malevolence, and as it did, the shadows danced around them, mimicking the anguished memories of their past. Images of trauma, loss, and guilt washed over them like a dark tide. "Remember your light," Claire shouted, pushing against the fear constricting her chest. "Fixate on us, on each other." A flicker of warmth radiated outward as the nurses clenched their hands even tighter. Small beams of light wavered into existence, illuminating their faces momentarily before they were quickly extinguished again by fear. Yet Claire spotted a glimmer of flame of determination growing in the circles of their hands. The Midnight Shrouder howled, a sound that clawed at Claire's sanity, reverberating through the shadows. "You think you can fight me? You are already dead within. Just wither under the weight of your sins." The tendrils penetrated deeper, slithering like live serpents around Claire's legs, attempting to pull her down into a bottomless pit of despair. A flash of her family's faces struck her. She could almost feel their warmth. Their joy bolstered her. She wouldn't let the Shrouder win. "I refuse to be lesser," Claire screamed, the words forced out through clenched teeth. Then she bent down, grasping the earth beneath her. "We fight for every heartbeat. We fight for every breath." Ella mirrored her defiance, raising her free hand in solidarity, shouting, "Together!" In that moment of unity, the circle of nurses erupted with life. It wasn't just about fighting the shadow. It was about supporting one another, holding their truth like a shield against the encroaching darkness. Yet, the shadows recoiled, a sudden gust pulling back, swirling in chaos as if sensing their resurgence. The Midnight Shrouder screeched, its form contorting with a malevolence that sent shards of ice through Claire's veins. "This isn't over. Your bonds are your weakness," it hissed, the voice dripping with malice. The shadows began to shift, catching on fire, flickering like dying embers. But Claire's heart pulsed louder now. She felt Ella's presence beside her, felt the strength of every nurse within the circle. They were not weak, they were survivors. Their combined courage ignited like a bonfire within the darkness as they faced their fears head-on. Bright streams of light erupted from their linked hands, weaving through the tumult like ribbons, pushing the shadows back inch by inch. But just as victory seemed within reach, the monstrous silhouette morphed and fractured around them, revealing something startling beneath the shifting chaos, a deeper, darker void, more profound than the Midnight Shrouder itself. No, Claire breathed, desolation washing over her, suddenly aware that this was only the beginning of their nightmare. What lay within that sprawling abyss? Would they have the strength to confront it, or would it swallow them all? The shadows twisted, awakening something unspeakable, something that had been waiting in the depths, ready to consume them. In the heart of their battle, Claire felt a pulse of dread, one that had nothing to do with the darkness outside. It whispered their names, luring them closer to the void. Would they step into it willingly, or was it an invitation to a fate worse than death? The darkness enveloped them, weighty and suffocating, as Claire's heart raced in her chest. The rhythmic pounding matched the intensity of the whispers wrapping around her, each syllable a dagger of fear driving into her resolve. The Midnight Shrouder's haunting laughter echoed, shimmering through the chaos. It had morphed, become something worse, the embodiment of their darkest fears and regrets. "Give in!" It sneered, twisting the shadows around them. "You cannot escape what lies within." "No!" Claire roared, feeling both fear and courage collide in her chest. The memories clawed at her, bitter and chilling, yet they sparked a flame she wouldn't let them take her. "We are not weak. We are together." Ella's grip found hers again, a lifeline in the suffocating dark. Gradually, the hands of the other nurses clutched together, forging a chain of defiance against the tendrils of shadow. "Hold on," Claire urged, drawing strength from their bond. "Remember why we fight." A flicker of light ignited behind her closed eyes. The faces of her children flashed before her, the countless lives they'd touched as nurses, the laughter shared, tears cried, and battles fought. They needed to remember this. The shadows shivered and pulsed with uncertainty. Together. The chorus of voices rose, a wave of defiance against the insidious whispers of despair. "We will not join you!" The air crackled with determination, tugging against the darkness as if a storm were brewing. Claire opened her eyes, her pulse echoed against the pulse of light blooming in their midst. It shimmered brighter with each beat, a fire ignited not just in her but in each nurse around her. They were connected, their experiences merging into a tapestry of resilience. In that shared moment, the Midnight Shrouder hesitated, its laughter faltering, its twisted visage unsettled by this flicker of hope. "You think you can fight me?" it hissed, shadows recoiling as if from flame. Claire stepped forward, fear transformed into purpose. "We're not fighting you," she declared, her voice resolute and sharp. "We're embracing the truth. We're choosing to live." As her words swept through the group, the light lingered and swelled. The dark tendrils that had sought to ensnare them began to falter, pulled back by the force of their collective will. Claire could feel it in her bones. They were not just nurses. They were warriors. Yet, the Midnight Shrouder turned frantically, becoming more monstrous, its form twisting into something grotesque. "Your bond is nothing before the weight of your souls," it shrieked, a cacophony of guilt and fear that echoed painfully. Yet, every taunt only strengthened their resolve. "Fight!" Claire shouted, channeling every fiber of her being into the collective force gathered against it. "We face our fears. We will not run." And just like that, a power surged from within, an incandescent blaze consuming doubt, igniting hope. The figures of regret and despair flickered, the shadows weaving chaotic patterns as the nurse's presence shone brighter than it ever had, alive, beautiful, and unyielded by darkness. Then, the ground trembled violently. The chasm widened beneath them, a bottomless pit beckoning, but like a dam bursting, Claire and the nurses lunged forward. "We will not be consumed!" They shouted in unison, the words forming a shield against the void threatening to swallow them whole. Their light erupted, chasing the darkness back as laughter mixed, breaking the Midnight Shrouder's hold. It screeched, and with a last desperate surge, began to collapse upon itself, shadows wailing in a final effort to envelop Claire and her colleagues. But they pushed forward, hand in hand, heart to heart, fueled by memories, battles fought, and lives saved. Together. Claire cried one last time as the light exploded with blinding radiance, illuminating the void with a warmth they hadn't felt before. As the brilliance engulfed them, the shadows dissipated, spinning away into nothingness. The darkness began to fold in on itself, unraveling, revealing the familiar sterile walls of the hospital. Claire blinked against the sudden brightness, her breath hitching as the realization settled in. They were alive. They were free. Relief washed over her, tears pouring down her face. She turned, engulfing Ella and the other nurses in a fierce embrace. They had faced true horror together and emerged, not just unscathed but renewed, a bond forged in the fire of despair they had defied. They had conquered the Midnight Shrouder, banished it to the shadows where it belonged. In the quiet aftermath, heartbeats steadied. The machines beeped reassuringly, the fluorescent lights no longer flickered ominously, and the oppressive weight lifted. They had once been prisoners of fear, but now, they stood triumphant. "Thank you," Claire whispered, her voice breaking with emotion, "for trusting each other." As the night descended into dawn, they shared smiles, some laughter, and a newfound understanding of courage. Theirs was a strength unbreakable, a light that would shine fiercely, no matter the darkness lurking outside. As the first rays of sun crept through the hospital windows, Claire squeezed Ella's hand tightly. "This is just the beginning," she said, knowing their unyielding unity would guide them through any shadow that dared to cross their path. So she took a deep breath. It was time to return to the world, to their families, where stories awaited them. Where light and darkness coexisted, and where they had proven that love and courage could outshine even the darkest fears. As they stepped outside, the light flooded over them like healing rain, washing away what lingered from the night. The shadows had retreated, but those memories stirred within them a reminder to cherish the light and the bonds they had forged in the face of despair. And so, their journey continued. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for each thrilling story to come. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us grow. Then flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about how they conquered the Midnight Shrouder. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.